and move the controls out of my way here so we can get to everything. Now, Generations uses TrueType fonts. With the upgrade to 2.0, which is going to be, you're going to get a notice from us if you've upgraded next week to get your upgrade. So, I'm going to go ahead and start showing a couple of the features for the 2.0 here, but nothing that if you haven't upgraded yet that would stop you from learning anything from this webinar. Okay, we're going to look at lettering. Lettering in Generations is TrueType fonts, and there are pre-digitized fonts in the new home upgrade. To get to lettering, it's the same as if you're creating a design. You're going to go up to either the create and insert text, or if you're an icon person, it's over here. It's the big red A, sliding over here on the right-hand toolbar. So when I click on either of those, I have this insert text dialog box. And the insert text dialog box gives me this input area. It's like your word processor. I'm just going to type in testing for right now so I can show you a couple of things. Now, if I want to change the font after I've entered lettering, it's the same as your word processor. I have to select what I've entered and come down to my font list. Here's my font list. This is my size in millimeters, and those of you who've been in the webinars know I tell you work in millimeters because it's pretty easy to convert. This is 1 inch. 25.4 is 1 inch. Okay? So here's my preview of the selected font. We're going to kind of stay with these two things for right now. So if I click on this font list drop-down arrow, what it's going to show me is anything that says TT, or I have this little, postscript type of thing, or OT on the side. See all of these? These are all TrueType fonts, and they display in the preview when I select them. So now I talked about pre-digitized fonts. So as I'm going to scroll up, because these are going to be mixed in, but when you see your pre-digitized fonts in the Upgrade 2.0, see where it says Rapid Transit and it's got the little @ symbol, no TT here or any other symbol on the side, and it displays as an outline. Those are the pre-digitized fonts in the new Home 2.0. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of scroll down, and we're going to stay with Arials because everybody has this on their computer, because TrueType fonts are installed onto each particular Windows system. So I'm going to have some basic TrueType fonts that came with my Windows system, but I also have a lot of decorative fonts that I've added in. So we're going to start with just testing, right? And I'm on Arial, and I'm at 1 inch. Here's my preview of what that's going to look like, just the preview of the font. And here's my text path, which says Auto. And what Auto is it's a straight line, and it's going to be created in the size needed to space this. Now, on your fonts, the spacing on any particular TrueType font is based on how the font is created. So that you guys understand, the program does not actually control spacing. The font controls the spacing, okay? Now I can come down here and I can say bold or italic. And I can also use the small lettering stitch or do a vertical layout. So these are all of my settings. Okay, what we're going to look at is the basic stuff first. So as I come down to the bottom, see where it says above the line, centered on the line, or below the line. These are options that will help when I have arcs or circles, or if I need to balance things a little bit. But we're going to stay above the line for right now and just insert lettering. Here is my lettering. I'm going to go ahead and generate to put the stitches in. And here's what I look like. Now you can see, even in my preview, let me go back to my preview real quick up here, I have some space between the T and the E. That is because that is the font spacing between a capital and a lowercase letter. If I want to change the spacing on my fonts or my lettering once it's created, I can do a couple of different things. First, when it is inserted, I'm on my text path, and that is this line right here. I have a black bounding box which allows me to resize it in different ways based on, anything you can resize in a Windows program by dragging on it. So that comes in handy sometimes. Then I have like these little arrows, an edit button and these little diamonds underneath each letter. So, you know, if I click on the edit button, I come back in here and I can change the lettering or change the font or make changes. If I click on this arrow, it is a kerning arrow. It's going to kern the whole line. It makes my text path longer and spaces out my letters. Or if I want to put them closer together, I can actually even, you know, cross them over. Okay, so I'll put those closer together for right now, and I used this arrow next to the edit button. This arrow at the top is going to let me scale the letters taller, and then I have to put new stitches in them, or make them shorter, or even flip them over on the line. So let me undo that and we'll get back to where we were. Okay, so there's where we were originally. This arrow on the side where the letters are is going to let me stair step. See how that's stair stepping the letters? I can actually take this to the vertical if I want to. Okay, now see how the letters are jammed up? That's when I would use this and drag them and space them out. And, you know, if I wanted to, I could left click on the diamonds and move each individual letter. But I'm going to go back to our original layout here. Okay, so here's where we were originally. If I left click on an individual diamond underneath each letter and highlights green, then I can move my mouse over it and left click and hold that mouse button down and drag the individual letter into position and space it. If I need to move 2 or 3 letters, I can hold the control key on my keyboard and I can move those letters. And at some point, the reason that crossed over is because you can see I put them right on top of each other at the end of that line, right? So you can go as far as your text path will allow you. You know, if I click on this and move it, I can't go any further. But if I have multiple letters, I could take all 3 letters to that. Right, so that's kind of the basics of, you know, inserting text. Now let's get into some of the more decorative things on text. And I'm going to check real quick because it looks like I have a question and I'm not sure what that was for. Okay, so we're going to get back to some of the other things in the lettering. So let me go ahead and click on Edit. Okay, we're on a text path here. And if I come down here, there's my text path. It's a current line. Before it was auto. What it's telling me is it made the line, which is the automatic one, and I can click on this and say, you know, let's make a new line. And if I say, okay, I can draw that line anywhere I need it to be, in any angle, in any direction. Let's go back. And if I come in here and I say, well, you know what, maybe I want to arc the letters. I just pick an arc. And then I place a left click where I want to begin the arc, a left click where I want to end that arcing, and I come back to the middle and just drag the line. Just move your mouse and it'll drag it up until I reach the arc that I want. And then I just place another left click. Okay, so there's my arc. All right, now let's look at some other things very quickly. If I'm arcing above something, you can see having my text above the line works out very well. I could even center it on the line, and you can see the changes. The spacing gets a little bit closer together because now we're all centered, although my T will drop a little bit below some of these, right? And I might need to space a little bit different. If I have an upward arc or circle, putting it below the line will cause the letters to jam up. So you can see why using the proper placement here, either above, centered, or below, makes a difference on your spacing. Now, if I made this arc a downward arc, I would want to go below or centered on the line for the same reason. So let me go ahead and I'm going to make a new arc here. You can see how the letters are kind of jammed up right now because that's an upward arc, but the minute I place them at the, below the baseline or below the text path and I make a downward arc, they space correctly. Now, on any arc, I have some of the same tools that I have with just a default text path, right? Which is the line. I can drag the side arrow and space this out and make that arc continue on so that spaces the letters. You know, I have this arrow up here, which is going to let me flip the lettering or scale the height of it, just like in the other one. It's just a little placement difference here. I have, you know, this here as well, which lets me kind of shrink that or make that arc bigger. And it spaces by default, but it's about the arc. See the text path getting wider and longer? And then I have this arrow right in the middle, and if I click and drag on that, I can change my arc. I can arc it, you know, downwards, I could straighten it, I can arc it upward. All right, so that's what those arrows do, and of course I still have the edit button. So when you're playing with text, you know, try these arrows. The worst thing that happens is you have to undo, but you can see anytime I've made changes, I can come over and just undo once, or click on this drop-down menu and undo multiple times. I can also redo to get back to what I want. All right, so that's the basic things about text. Now let's take a look at some of our text paths. We have auto, which you know is a line. We have an arc, an ellipse, and a freehand. Ellipse is just going to be a circle, and you just draw your circle. You know, you don't necessarily have the same spacing options. You do have the scaling option. You have spacing in that you can make this circle or ellipse smaller and place the letters closer together. You can make this an oval by using this arrow, so it's a little bit different. I still have my little nodes here so that I can left click on one of the little diamonds or nodes, hold the control key, and I can still select multiple letters and move them. And you can see as I do, you know, they're going to go around on this arc, or on this ellipse. And I can align the lettering any way I want. All right, so I wanted to show you that. And let's go back in here. I'm just going to delete this. And let's take a look at a couple of other things. When I use a freehand line, it's a good idea to use centered on the line. And I'm going to show you why real quick. I'm just going to use testing this out a little bit longer. And when I'm doing a freehand line, I really, you know, a left click is a straight line. See the straight lines? If I make a mistake, I can backspace. Right click is going to give me like these nice little curves. And let's generate. So you can see, you know, I might have to space this a little bit, and I have the same thing over here. You know, there's those arrows, and I can just space this a little bit and put those letters a little tighter together. I still have the ability to, you know, select each individual letter and move them closer together. I still have the ability to scale the height. It's going to scale a little differently, and I can flip this over still. But using that centered option, make sure that as I go around these curves here, that the letters space better than if I used above the line. You can see they're decent here. They're a little spread out. Here they're starting to bunch up a little bit, right? And that's above the line. Or if I used below the line, because I would end up with a bunching here and this would be spread out. But centered on the line, make sure that that spaces pretty evenly throughout the lettering, you know, path. All right, do you guys have any questions so far on what I've shown you on the lettering? I know some of you guys have had the program for a while, probably know a lot of this, but you know, I just wanted to make sure that we covered everything kind of from the basics moving into the advanced in the webinar. So do you guys have any questions on the lettering I've shown you so far? Okay, you guys are all good? All right, so let me put the question box back so we can see the screen, or at least I can see the screen. We're going to start taking a look at some of the other things in the program. So let me delete this text path. And let's go back up here. And let's start looking at multiple line lettering. If I could type, that would be better, right? Okay, so I have 3 lines of lettering. To make this, I just hit enter in between each line. if I want to change the font, to drag this, but, I could do this and change this to different fonts for each line, or I could change it so that only one letter is a different font. Okay? So I have those options. Let me find a little bit different font for this one. That's not too much different. All right, so I can even change the size. So if I want this letter to be a little bit bigger, I just make it a little bit bigger. And if I want it bold, I can select bold. Okay, so I have that option for each letter and each line, but we're going to look at multiple line lettering. And if I just leave it on auto, each one of these is going to be on its own line. So let's go ahead and say OK and put our stitches into the file. And there we go. We have 3 lines of lettering. Right now, you can see those little open boxes right here, and then you have the black bounding boxes. That means that multiple things are selected, multiple items. And what I can do is treat this similar to a word processor. If I want these to be aligned, they're right now aligned to their left. If you follow my mouse, see where my mouse is? Coming all the way down to my alignment toolbar, I have these aligning options. These are spacing options. These are aligning options. So I can align this to the left or to the right. I don't want to align to the top or the bottom because they would be all on top of each other, see? But I can say, let's go ahead and center this. Okay, now these are still selected, multiple items, 1, 2, and 3. You can tell by the open boxes. So if I want to edit a particular line, I have to left click off to the side, and when I left click on each one of these lettering lines, I can edit each line individually. So I could come in here and say, well, I really want this one to be on an arc. And the reason my font is not showing here is because I have 3 different fonts selected in the program, right? And my size, it's the same thing. I have different sizes. Remember, I changed that size on the T. So I'm going to say, let's make an arc. I'm going to arc from, I want to start the arc here, end it here, and we're going to arc up around this word. And oh yeah, I'm kind of centered on the line. I forgot about that. If I click on edit, I can go above the line and have that align a little bit better. And I can take each one of these lines and edit them in this fashion. Here's my second line. I could say, well, let's put this on a new line. I just select line, put it above the line, and let's make our line from here to here. And I can do that for each line of lettering. I could go in and change the fonts if I wanted to, but what's nice is that each line is its individual line to space and to edit and move around as needed. Now there's some other things in the lettering which are kind of really good fundamental things that you need, but there's also some fun things, so we're going to look at those next. Let me go ahead and make a new file, and I'm going to click on the font, and I'm just going to backspace and take everything out. And I'm on Big Noodle tilting, I guess. Let's go ahead and change to maybe Bistecca. And you might not have that font, but it depends on what you've installed on your system. And I'm going to take my size down to, we'll start with 15. Okay, that's 15 millimeters. And I'm going to say small lettering. Now, this, because it's not Arial, is going to have some issues. These are going to be very, very narrow on the T, right? And I have it bolded because without it being bold, this is not going to look very well. So let's bold this and say OK. And let's generate. So at 15, my lettering is formed. You can read it very well, and it's a decent size. These T's, however, up here, I might edit because they're very narrow here. Okay, we're not going to get into editing yet. I just want you to start tucking these things into the back of your head. This is too narrow right here. So let's go back into our lettering. Now, because I know that it's too narrow at 15, unless I want to do a lot of editing, I'm probably not going to use this font for small letters. In most cases, for very small letters, I would move to an Arial font, and I would just use Arial. Okay, now we're at 15. I'm going to take the bold off of here, and I'll show you what that looks like in comparison to this. Okay, this would stitch just fine. I might, space this a little bit better, but this would stitch just fine. Okay, now let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Let's take this down to 10. And I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to insert it like this, and I want to show you something. This may be fine when it stitches. It's at 10. It's still fairly small. I might want to consider, if it's a very thin font especially, coming back in here and saying bold. And I'm going to go ahead and put this above the line where it's supposed to be. And if I come in and edit and make it bold, I might want to pull that apart a little bit just to give it some more room. And see if that will work better, because I've given my lettering a little more width. Okay, and this is at 10. Now let's go back and let's take a look at below 10. When we get to 7.5 and 5 millimeters and 2.5, these are very small. They require different settings. So I'm going to go to 5. I'm definitely going to put bold on, because I want my letters to have a little more meat to them and a little more stitching, because small satin stitch pulls sometimes more than a wider satin, but it's very narrow and it tends to sink into the fabric, and it pulls tighter. So I've got some changes that need to be made. Bold your lettering when possible. And if you look over here, we have the small lettering stitch. And what that is a set of stitch settings for underlaying, compensation, and things like that that make small lettering behave a little better. So let's go ahead and click on small lettering. Now the bold on this, I have to be careful with when I get to a certain point, because I may lose the E, any, like the A, those little tiny holes, if I bold it. So let's go ahead and generate this. And this is what I have. You can see bolding that font's going to cost me some problems, because this is very, very little lettering. So I might want to have to, come in here and edit and make these letters a little deformed to work. Or, since these are Arial, I can use another feature in the program. I can come over to View and Toolbars, and I can turn on my building block bar. And in your building blocks, you have these letters. And these are, all upper and lower case, and they're even smaller than this, so that you know. And, I can select those letters. Now, to line them up, I would, of course, use my grid maybe and be a little bit better. Align them, and I can space them so that they're even, or I can put them closer together, or I can left-click and drag around them, and I can come down on my aligning toolbar, and I can say super align, above the line, on a line, and if I need to place my lettering from here to here, about that space, when I get the message, just say OK. And once I put them onto that super align tool, let me kind of move this out of the way here. Once I put them on the super align tool, you can see I've got everything other than edit and being able to access any lettering. I can access the current line, an arc, ellipse, freehand, existing outline, or current line, right? I can put them above the line or center of the line or below the line. So while we have small lettering settings I can use, I may have to edit some of these, and we will cover that in an editing webinar, okay? Or I can just use the pre-digitized small fonts that are in the building blocks. Okay, does that make sense? You guys, you all have building blocks if you have generations 1.6 and you have these building blocks. So with lettering, you have a bunch of options. You have a small lettering setting, or you have the pre-digitized fonts. And don't trust your 3D preview on your screen. Don't trust it until somebody can actually sew thread on the inside of my screen. It's just a preview. So do a test stitch and make sure that this is going to work for your fabric. All right, so I have a quick question. Oh, Ramona is saying super align tool, nice. A little note about the super align tool, you can use it for anything, not just letters. You can take flowers or copy and pastings or use your other building blocks and use the super align tool to create some really cool things. And we'll look at that as we kind of go along as well. All right, you ready? Let's take a look at one of the fun things in the program. When I go to my lettering, I'm going to go off of small lettering. Honestly, if you're going to go down to 2.5, you might want to take a look at using the 5mm running stitch letters, because you saw how small 5 was. You know, at a certain point, you just have to wonder if it's worth putting that small of lettering on anything. But let me go back and let's go to 25, which is about an inch. And we have this neat little thing called art font. And I'm going to just put this in capital letters and go back and make sure I change my size again. And here's art font. And I'll take the bold off and take my small lettering setting off. And here's my art font. So in my art font, I have these pre-designed shapes, and they really are text paths, but they have these, you know, specific settings and, you know, size for the most part. So here we go. Here's my cheer. Now, you know, when you look at this, you have the black bounding boxes, and we put the letters in, the stitches in. You have these little yellow boxes, right? Or diamonds. You have these little diamonds underneath the letter, which, you know, allow you to move each individual letter. And you have the yellow boxes here. So the yellow boxes let me design the shape of this. I can actually make it straight. And watch what happens to my letters as I change these settings. Okay, the letters are reshaping. This is going to let me scale it outwards or closer together. It's going to be the same thing. My letters, it's kind of a spacing tool on some level. So, you know, if you want this to be a little bit smaller, let me show you a different way, because this is your spacing option, this diamond. This is going to control how severe this is based on the word. But watch what happens to these letters. They keep reshaping according to this text path. Now, if I really wanted to make this a little more megaphone-ish, I would just use the black bounding boxes and I would scale it that way and then put your stitches in. So that's art font. That's one of the things in art font. We'll look at some of these other things real quick because I want you to play with these if you get a chance. In art font, I have all these really neat things. I've got, you know, like the stop sign. I can change the corners, the arrows up, the arrows down, the slope. You know, I've got the little wave, and I've got all of these options. You know, double sunken, downward, upwards. You know, going upwards. This is the Star Wars effect. The belt cycle, we're not going to look at right now. It's fun if you get to play with it, but you know, this is the Star Wars effect. Oh, if I could type, it's better, but I'm going to type this in. All right, so I've got this art font selected, and I might make this a little bit smaller just so it fits on our screen. So we'll go down to about 15, and there we go. There's the Star Wars effect. Now I have multiple lines of lettering, so each line has its own set of controls, right? Its own spacing and its own, you know, scaling. Basically, I could make this all straight, or I could make it a tighter curve. So I could take each one of these and scale it to be what it needed to be on this arc to get, or on this path to get this to be very Star Wars-ish looking. All right, does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and generate those real quick, and let's see if you guys have any quick questions. Terry's asking if we can type the building block fonts, and the answer is no, they're each little individual letters. Down the road, there may be some small lettering fonts added to those new pre-digitized fonts that are in there right now. Right now, those are kind of scaled not to go, really, I shouldn't say scaled, they're really designed not to go much below, 15 to 12 on the size. Terry, I think I answered that first question and the second question. I'm just going to left click and drag those letters from the building blocks. But if I'm wrong about the second question, let me know. I can't really go through the pre-digitized fonts right now, Terry. There's, I believe, 23 of them. I might be able to go and look at one of them, but I'm still kind of in a beta version on this computer, so I'm a little nervous about what might be in there on the fonts, but I'll go look in a second. All right, so any other questions? And thank you for the nice comments, everybody. Terry asked about seeing some of the pre-digitized fonts. So before I kind of move forward, you guys have any questions on anything? You guys are going to go play with this? All right, now I'm going to show you one more thing, and then I'll look at some of those pre-digitized fonts for you. Okay, in here, let me get rid of this. Here is art font, right? And we'll make this a little bit bigger because I'm just going to go back to the word testing for right now. Okay, when I'm done with art font, I just remove the check mark and I'm done with art font, right? But if I really, really want to envelope or reshape letters to match something pretty specific, then if the font or if art font doesn't have one of these spaces or one of these shapes that I need, like this, right? I do have another option. Let me go back and take off art font. This other option is called Reshape, and it can be done with a design, it can be done with lettering, it can be done with anything in the program. So I'm going to come down to my Align toolbar. As I come down here, see this little blue Reshape icon all the way on the left-hand side of your Align toolbar. When I click on that, I get all of these reshape options. This is usually good for making a flower look wilted, but I have control over these as well, and they're going to do some different things than what my art font did, and they're going to give me a little more control sometimes. So let's look at Style 109. In my art font, I got about the same thing as this arc, upward arc, right? But the difference is, see these little nodes here? I only have 2 nodes on my art font, but if I move over these nodes, I can really, I'm going to kind of exaggerate this arcing, really arc these fonts. And then I've got all these nodes on the side, so I could do, way more. And you can see as I'm pulling this, it's reshaping and flipping them around, right? This is really going to give you kind of a 3D look. See how it's moving? It's more like a graphics reshape than your font. I'm actually reshaping the outline, where art font just takes the font and reshapes it. Here I'm reshaping the font outline. You can see how I can bow it and make it look very 3D, right? And I've got a lot finer control on this, so I can make it look like pretty much anything I want, depending on what time you want to invest in this, right? When I'm all done, I press enter. If I look at this and think, oh, geez, oh beans, I can't even stand this, just hit escape. But if you like what you see, press enter and generate to place the stitches in, and I can really shape a design or really shape the lettering. And, I can do a lot more custom things with this. Now, once I have one reshape applied, with art font, I can apply one art font setting. With Reshape, even like picking this square is going to let me do a lot of stuff. because I have all these little nodes on the side. So I can get really, really interesting and custom text all the way down to twisting the outlines on top of each other, or making this look very 3D or barreled. Okay, I just kind of want to show you how you can twist things. So I'm going to twist that outline around on my G. Okay, and then I'm going to press enter. And it says you're crossing your outlines. And I'm going to say, yeah, let's do it for the heck of it, and ignore that warning and regenerate. And what it does is regenerate those stitches so I can really make some really 3D looking letters, or use this to make some really 3D looking designs. So I'm going to go ahead and stop with the lesson for right now. Terry's asking about the 2.0 upgrade, so I'll answer you guys real quick. You're going to get an install mailed to you, but we're also going to put the link to the download in your members area. So those of you, who log in for your webinars, you will all have a member account that you'll be able to access this upgrade. But you're still going to get the install. You're going to have a key file emailed to you based on the email we have from the purchase. Okay? All right, so Tina is asking on the align toolbar, what's the purpose of the tool that would take the lettering and squish it all together like we just used, the Reshape? Sometimes you have some custom text that you want to make, or you can use this for designs as well. So other than custom text and really making it kind of funny and matching something, or playing with a font and making it a little more, designish and twisted around or shaped, you can use this for example, like a bouquet of flowers. You know how you put like flowers and they're all in one direction? Well, you could either digitize it so it looks like it's, at a sideways angle, or digitize it so that it looks like it's wilting, or, folding over a little bit, or you can copy and paste the one you made and reshape that flower so that you're just doing the work once and you're able to get a flower bouquet that looks a little more realistic. Or in the case of butterfly wings, you can have this flat butterfly on the screen, or you can take that butterfly and make it look like it's actually flying or fluttering a little more. Ramona's asking if you could take the word dog and you could reshape it. That's a good thing too. You could reshape and get a general shape. You'd have to put a little more work into that, but you could actually reshape it in that manner. All right, so that it makes a little more sense before I show you the true type fonts, let me show you real quick. You guys all have this image, and those of you who, worked with years and years and years ago, that, some of you probably are some of our very first customers, know that we referred to this butterfly and Reshape as torturing the butterfly. So I'm going to go ahead and make this butterfly, and it's just going to be auto-generated. And he's just kind of a normal little butterfly, right? Let me turn off my image. But if I want to take this butterfly and make him look like he's fluttering or flying or a little different, then I just left click on this butterfly, this whole design. He's all grouped together, and I go to Reshape and say, let's reshape the butterfly. And I'm just going to pick one of these. You could play with these and come up with different things, right? You can see the reshape already. And I'm not going to edit him. I'm just going to go ahead and say enter and just regenerate. And there is my butterfly. He looks completely different than the other butterfly. And I can even make him look like he was fluttering, or, take the time to get him to reshape the way I want it. All right, so do you guys have any more questions before I show you, some of the true type or some of the pre-digitized fonts? You guys are all good? All right, real quick, last thing. Like I said, I'm not positive what's on here because I didn't have time to make sure I knew what was on here today, but let's scroll up. On our pre-digitized fonts, there is, we'll do Rapid Transit. When I bring up a pre-digitized font, there is no TT next to it. See how there's TT, or there's those little symbols because I have PostScript fonts? Those are true type PostScript or open face type fonts, anything with a TT. When I have a TT with an @ symbol, that's still a true type font. It's just a version of that true type font. When I have something like this with just the @ symbol, and it shows a preview of these, wireframe designs. That is pre-digitized. Now I can still scale it down, okay? And I have all of the same options, except art font. I cannot use art font on these. But I can still use all of the other settings, right? All my text paths, vertical, small lettering, and, so everything's there except art font because it's, Reshape and these are made to be something specific. So let me go ahead and put generate in, and here's my true type font. Okay, now, you guys, I will write a little note on this and do a little video, but because they're pre-digitized, on the commercial side especially, they try to control the in and out points so it stitches a certain way. That means that you may have some jumps. If you don't like the jumps, then this is what you're going to do. If you have a commercial machine, they just trim, or you can click on scissors and put a trim in. But if you want to make sure that your pre-digitized fonts go, without any jumps or as few jumps as you can possibly have, just come over and select the font. You can either right-click and drag around it to select them, or you can click on that color chip and come over to this film strip. And your film strip here is what shows all these little bits, parts, and pieces of your design, right? Well, when you have your whole design selected, your film strip shades. Just right-click on one of the shaded cells, go to Properties, and remove the user-defined in and out points, and you can remove the user-defined trims as well, and just say OK, right-click off to the side, and generate. And what the program's done is now rerouted, and if you have, a commercial machine, it's going to place trims between the letters that aren't touching. Now I also have the option, as I said, of spacing. So if you don't want any jumps in between, see that little jump that's between, the one letter there? You can put them closer together, and you may have to move a letter. You'll probably still have a jump there, and you may have to move a letter here, and space a little bit, but that's going to put those all closest together so that if you really don't want to trim, you don't really have to on this. All right, so let me see if there's any last questions. And Sunny, I'm not sure why your Reshape tool would not work. It should work. Make sure that you have something selected, left click on it, not right click. Make sure it's left clicked with the boxes around it, the black boxes, and then try your Reshape tool. And if not, I'm not really sure why it wouldn't work. You'd have to contact technical support through our website, and maybe we could see what was going on that way. All right, do you guys have any more questions before we kind of stop for the day on the webinar? You guys are all good? Oh, thank you, Jeanette. I enjoy teaching you guys. You guys are a nice group, and I'm glad that you guys ask questions and you aren't shy about it, because there are no stupid questions. So don't ever be afraid to ask a question. Even if you're not sure what it's called, I will eventually figure out what you're trying to ask me. Or sometimes you just might have to kind of explain a little bit further if I don't quite understand what you're asking. But all right, everybody, let me go ahead and stop the recording, and you guys have a great day. And, play with some of the things that I've showed you, because if you have been